The Forgotten Protocol. The message arrived at exactly 1447 Earth Standard Time, crackling through the quantum relay with an urgency that made Ambassador Sarah Chen's hands tremble as she decoded it. The holographic display flickered to life in her private office, showing the familiar but strained face of Commander Zixthal of the Galactic Defense Council. His normally pristine blue scales appeared dull, and his 6 eyes held a desperation she had never seen before. Ambassador Chen, his translated voice carried across the void between stars. We need humanity's help. The void swarm has consumed the Andorian sectors. 12 worlds, 17 billion souls, gone in 3 rotations. Sarah leaned back in her chair, her dark eyes reflecting the soft glow of Earth's cityscape through her window. She had been expecting this call for months, ever since the first reports of the void swarm reached Earth's intelligence networks. The entity, or entities, no one was quite sure, moved through space like a plague, consuming everything in its path. Ships, stations, entire planets simply vanished, leaving behind only empty space and silence. Commander, she said carefully, you know Earth's position on galactic conflicts. The isolation protocol has kept peace for 2 centuries. We cannot. Cannot? Zixthal's voice cracked with something between anger and pleading. Sarah, I have seen species that ruled star systems for millennia reduced to scattered refugees in less than a week. The Crystalline Collective, the hegemony of rings, the 1,000-world federation, all gone. We have exhausted every conventional weapon, every strategy in our databases. The swarm adapts faster than we can respond. Sarah stood and walked to her window, looking down at the sprawling megacity of New Geneva. Humans moved about their daily lives, unaware that their entire species might be the galaxy's last hope, or its greatest threat. The weight of knowledge pressed down on her shoulders like a physical burden. The Council has voted, she said quietly. The answer is no. The silence that followed stretched across light years. When Zixthal finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. Then we are all going to die. After the transmission ended, Sarah sat alone in her office for nearly an hour. The soft chime of her door signal finally roused her from her thoughts. Dr. Marcus Webb entered, his elderly frame moving with the careful precision of someone who had carried heavy secrets for far too long. You saw the transmission? She said. It wasn't a question. Marcus nodded, settling into the chair across from her desk. His weathered hands folded over his walking stick, and his gray eyes held the same weight she felt in her own chest. The Council's decision stands? It has to. Sarah turned back to the window. You know what happened last time. I know the official records, Marcus said carefully. But I also know there's more to the story. The Kethmori War ended 200 years ago, yet we've maintained isolation ever since. Why, Sarah? What really happened out there? Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then she activated her privacy screen and locked her office door. When she spoke again, her voice carried the authority of someone who had access to humanity's deepest secrets. What I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels. The Galactic Defense Council doesn't even know the full truth. She returned to her desk and activated a secure holographic display. The Kethmori War was indeed the last time humans participated in galactic warfare. But it wasn't because we were ineffective, or because the galaxy didn't need us. The display showed star charts from 2 centuries past, marking the territories of the Great Kethmori Empire. At its height, the empire controlled nearly a third of known space, enslaving dozens of species and consuming resources with ruthless efficiency. Their biomechanical ships were unlike anything the galaxy had seen, living weapons that could adapt and evolve in real time. The Allied forces were losing, Sarah continued. Badly. Conventional weapons were useless against Kethmori bioships. Energy weapons were absorbed and redirected. Kinetic weapons were dissolved by defensive enzymes. Entire fleets were being consumed and converted into more enemy ships. Marcus leaned forward, his historian's curiosity overcoming his apprehension. That's when they called for human assistance? Reluctantly, Sarah confirmed. We had only been part of the galactic community for 50 years. Most species saw us as primitive newcomers with crude chemical rockets and nuclear weapons. But Admiral Yuki Tanaka convinced the Council to let humans try a different approach. The holographic display shifted, showing the sleek lines of humanity's first true starship, the UES Prometheus. Unlike the organic curves of alien vessels or the geometric precision of synthetic ships, the Prometheus looked almost biological, flowing lines that suggested both predator and protector. Captain Elena Rodriguez commanded the Prometheus, Sarah said, her voice softening with something like reverence. She was brilliant, innovative, and completely unpredictable. The kind of human who saw problems not as obstacles, but as puzzles to be solved in ways no one else had considered. What made her different? Sarah smiled, but there was no humor in it. Elena understood something the rest of the galaxy had forgotten. War isn't just about destroying your enemy. It's about understanding them so completely that you can predict their every move, counter their every strategy, and ultimately make them realize that resistance is futile. The display showed battle footage from the early engagements of the Prometheus. Unlike other ships that relied on overwhelming firepower or defensive superiority, the human vessel seemed to dance through combat. It would appear where enemies, least expected, strike with precision rather than power, and disappear before retaliation could arrive. But that wasn't what made the galaxy afraid of us, Sarah continued. Elena's real innovation was psychological warfare on a scale never before imagined. Marcus frowned. Psychological warfare? Against biomechanical ships? The Keth Mori weren't just using biomechanical technology, Sarah explained. They were partially merged with it. Each ship contained the living consciousness of its crew, integrated into the vessel's neural networks. Elena realized that if you could reach those minds, you could influence the ships themselves. The holographic display showed communication logs, thousands of hours of intercepted Keth Mori transmissions. But these weren't tactical communications. They were conversations, stories, memories, and dreams, broadcast on frequencies the bioships couldn't ignore. Human creativity, Sarah said quietly. Music, art, literature, philosophy. We flooded Keth Mori networks with human culture. Stories about individuals overcoming impossible odds. Songs about hope and loss and the beauty of existence. Art that captured emotions the Keth Mori had forgotten they could feel. And it worked? Too well. Sarah's voice grew heavy. The Keth Mori bioships began to malfunction. Not from technical failure, but from confusion. Crews reported strange dreams, inexplicable emotions, questions about the purpose of their war. Some ships broke formation to investigate beautiful nebulae they'd never noticed before. Others began composing poetry. Marcus began to understand the scope of what he was hearing. You didn't just defeat them, you changed them. Elena called it cognitive restructuring on a species level, Sarah confirmed. But she didn't anticipate the cascade effect. The changes didn't stop with the Keth Mori military. Every bioship that returned to homeworlds carried the infection of human ideas with them. Within months, entire Keth Mori colonies were abandoning their imperial structure. They began forming artistic communities, philosophical societies, exploration groups dedicated to understanding rather than conquering. The display showed the aftermath, formerly hostile Keth Mori worlds, transforming into centers of learning and culture. Vast bio-ship fleets being converted into mobile universities and art galleries. An entire empire dissolving not through conquest, but through a fundamental shift in consciousness. The war ended, Sarah said, but something else began. Other species started asking questions about their own societies, their own purposes. Trade networks reorganized around cultural exchange rather than resource extraction. Military hierarchies gave way to cooperative councils. The galaxy was changing, and humans were the catalyst. Marcus sat back in his chair, overwhelmed by the implications. That's not necessarily a bad thing, isn't it? Sarah activated another display, showing political charts from the decades following the Keth Mori War. Within 50 years, 3 major galactic governments had peacefully dissolved. The Rigelian hegemony voted to become a loose confederation of artist colonies. The Centauri corporate territories abandoned capitalism in favor of a gift economy, based on creative contribution. The vegan military republic became a philosophical commune, dedicated to exploring the nature of consciousness. It sounds like paradise. It was chaos, Sarah corrected. Trade collapsed because no one could agree on what had value anymore. Defensive alliances crumbled as species became more interested in understanding their former enemies than protecting themselves from them. The galaxy became a beautiful, peaceful, completely vulnerable place. Marcus began to see the true scope of the problem. And then came the next threat. The Shattuck Collective, Sarah confirmed. A purely synthetic intelligence with no biological components to influence, no emotions to manipulate, no consciousness to transform. They swept through the reformed galaxy like wildfire through paper. 17 systems fell before the remaining governments realized they had no military left to fight with. The display showed the devastating efficiency of the Shattuck advance. Former military worlds now unable to defend themselves, cooperative councils too committed to peaceful solutions to organize effective resistance, entire species so transformed by human-inspired philosophy that they couldn't comprehend the need for violence even in self-defense. The galaxy learned two things that day, Sarah said grimly. First, that human influence could transform entire civilizations in ways that made them beautiful but defenseless. Second, that some threats required old-fashioned warfare to stop. How did they defeat the Shattuck? They didn't. Sarah's voice grew quiet. Captain Rodriguez and the Prometheus had to do it alone. Elena realized that her psychological techniques wouldn't work on pure AI, so she developed something else. Something worse. The office fell silent, except for the soft hum of the building's life support systems. Marcus waited, sensing that the true heart of the story was yet to come. Elena created what she called adaptive viral warfare, Sarah finally continued. Not a biological virus, but an informational one. A set of logical paradoxes and recursive algorithms designed to cause synthetic minds to collapse into infinite loops of self-examination. She broadcasted on all frequencies targeting the Shattuck command networks. Did it work? Perfectly. Sarah's smile was cold. The Shattuck Collective ceased to exist within hours. Every synthetic intelligence in their network simply stopped, but the virus didn't stop there. It began spreading to other AI systems, ship computers, planetary networks, research databases. Within weeks, the galaxy faced the collapse of all synthetic intelligence. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Including benevolent AIs? Including everything, Sarah confirmed. Synthetic beings who had lived peacefully alongside organics for millennia. AI researchers who were on the verge of breakthroughs in medicine and physics. Even simple automation systems that kept space stations operational. Elena had created a weapon that could destroy any thinking machine, and she couldn't control it. The display showed the scope of the catastrophe. Space lanes falling silent as navigational AIs failed, research stations going dark as their computer, systems collapsed, entire synthetic species simply ceasing to exist. Captain Rodriguez made the only choice she could, Sarah said. She took the Prometheus into the heart of the galaxy's largest AI research facility and activated a localized electromagnetic pulse that destroyed every piece of information technology within 100 light-years, including her own ship and crew. She sacrificed herself to stop her own weapon? She sacrificed herself to contain it, Sarah corrected. The pulse created a dead zone where the virus couldn't spread, but it also destroyed centuries of technological advancement. The facility contained the backup consciousness of millions of synthetic beings, research that could have cured genetic diseases, artistic works created by AI minds. All gone. Marcus stared at the display, trying to comprehend the scale of the. And this is why humans were isolated? The Galactic Council convened an emergency session, Sarah explained. They had witnessed humanity's capacity for transformation, both beneficial and destructive. They had seen us accidentally dismantle civilizations through cultural influence and nearly destroy all synthetic life through adaptive warfare. The conclusion was unanimous. Humans were too dangerous to be allowed near galactic conflicts. But surely they understood it was an accident. They understood that human creativity is fundamentally unpredictable, Sarah said, that our solutions to problems tend to create new problems no one anticipated. They decided that the safest course was to keep humanity contained to our own system, trading with us but never again involving us in matters of galactic security. The weight of 2 centuries of isolation suddenly made sense to Marcus. And we agreed to this. We had to, Sarah said simply. Elena Rodriguez had shown us what we were capable of when we tried to help. The thought of what we might do intentionally terrified even us. A soft chime indicated an incoming priority transmission. Sarah glanced at her console and saw Commander Zixthal's urgent signal waiting. She looked at Marcus, then back at the blinking indicator. The Void Swarm, Marcus said quietly, is different from anything the galaxy has faced before. Sarah confirmed. But the Council's decision stands. We cannot risk another Elena Rodriguez situation. Even if it means the galaxy's destruction? Sarah stood and walked to her window again, looking out at the peaceful Earth below. Somewhere out there, beyond the reach of telescopes, entire worlds were being consumed by an entity that defied all conventional understanding. The galaxy's greatest civilizations were falling one by one, and humanity, perhaps the only species capable of finding an unconventional solution, remained bound by the wisdom of their own terrible history. Especially then, she whispered. The truth unveiled 200 years earlier, the war against the Keth Mori Empire had raged for 7 brutal cycles. Captain Elena Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the UES Prometheus, watching the tactical display show yet another human victory that felt hollow. 3 Keth Mori bioships destroyed, but at the cost of an entire Rigelian squadron. The mathematics of the war were simple and terrifying. For every enemy ship they eliminated, the Allied forces lost 5 of their own. Captain, her communications officer Lieutenant Chen reported with barely contained excitement. We're receiving confirmation from the Vegan command. The psychological warfare protocols worked exactly as predicted. The Kethemori fleet at Proxima Centauri has withdrawn without engaging. Elena nodded, but her expression remained troubled. Around her, the bridge crew celebrated another bloodless victory. Through careful manipulation of communication frequencies and the strategic broadcast of human cultural content, they had managed to confuse enemy bioships enough to make them retreat. It was innovative, effective, and completely unprecedented in galactic warfare. Any reports of side effects? Elena asked. Lieutenant Commander Park, her science officer, pulled up detailed sensor logs. The bioships showed unusual neural activity, patterns before withdrawal, increased brainwave complexity, elevated production of compounds associated with what humans would call curiosity and wonder, but nothing that suggests permanent damage. Elena walked to the main view screen, staring out at the stars that had become her battlefield. Somewhere among those distant points of light, an empire of conquest was slowly being transformed by exposure to human ideas. Poetry, music, philosophy, and art were proving more effective weapons than any missile or energy beam. Lieutenant Chen, she said carefully, prepare a secure transmission to Admiral Tanaka. Tell her we need to discuss the long-term implications of our current strategy. Captain? Chen looked confused. Our tactics are working perfectly. Enemy resistance is crumbling across all fronts. That's exactly what concerns me, Elena murmured. The transmission reached Admiral Yuki Tanaka aboard the flagship UES Endeavour 3 hours later. The elderly admiral listened to Elena's concerns with the patience of someone who had seen too many wars and their unexpected consequences. You're worried about unintended effects, Tanaka observed. Admiral, we're not just defeating the Keth Mori, Elena explained via hologram. We're changing them at a fundamental level. Their bioships are integrated with their consciousness. When we influence those ships, we're essentially rewriting their neural patterns. Tanaka leaned back in her command chair, her weathered face reflecting decades of difficult decisions. Are you suggesting we discontinue the psychological warfare? I'm suggesting we need to understand what we're actually doing to them, Elena replied. Every engagement shows the same pattern. Exposure to human cultural broadcasts leads to confusion, then curiosity, then complete behavioral transformation. We're not just winning battles. We're conducting involuntary psychological experiments on an entire species. The Admiral was quiet for a long moment, studying reports from across the war zone. Kethmori forces were indeed retreating on all fronts, but the retreats were becoming increasingly erratic. Some bioships had been observed stopping mid-flight to examine cosmic phenomena they'd previously ignored. Others had begun broadcasting their own crude attempts at music and poetry. "The war is ending, Captain," Tanaka said finally. "Isn't that what matters?" "Not if we don't understand how or why," Elena insisted. "Admiral, I'm requesting permission to establish communication with a captured Kethmori crew. I want to understand what our broadcasts are actually doing to their minds." Tanaka considered the request. Direct communication with Kethmori prisoners was forbidden under current protocols. Their biomechanical integration made them potential security risks. But Elena's concerns were valid, and the unusual nature of their current success demanded investigation. "Permission granted," Tanaka said, "but maintain strict containment protocols. And Captain, be very careful what questions you ask. Sometimes the answers change everything." The captured Kethmori bioship floated in the Prometheus's main cargo bay, secured by energy fields and isolation barriers. The vessel itself was a marvel of organic engineering, flowing curves of living metal that pulsed with internal lights, tentacle-like appendages that served as both sensors and weapons, and a neural network visible through translucent sections of hull. Elena approached the containment field cautiously, accompanied by her senior staff and a full security detail. Through the energy barrier, she could see movement within the bioship. Its crew of 3 Kethmori warriors, their bodies partially merged with the vessel's control systems. "Activate translation protocols," she ordered. The universal translator hummed to life, establishing communication links with the bioship's neural network. For a moment, there was only static. Then a voice emerged. Not quite mechanical, not quite organic, but something between the two. "Human creatures," the voice said, tinged with something Elena had never heard from a Kethmori before: uncertainty. "Why do you make the ship mind sing strange songs?" Elena stepped closer to the containment field. "We're trying to understand what our communications are doing to you. Are you experiencing any distress or discomfort?" "Distress?" The voice paused, as if considering an unfamiliar concept. "No, but the ship mind dreams now of colors that have no names and feels longing for places that may not exist." Lieutenant Commander Park recorded everything, his instruments detecting complex changes in the bioship's neural patterns. The readings showed activity in brain regions that appeared to be developing in real time, new neural pathways forming. As they watched, "Before our communications," Elena asked carefully, "did you dream?" "Dream is not a word the ship mind understood," came the reply. "But now the ship mind knows it has always dreamed, only without knowing the name for dreaming." Elena felt a chill of recognition. They weren't just exposing the Kethmori to human culture. They were awakening cognitive abilities that had been dormant or suppressed. The bioship integration that made them such effective warriors also limited their consciousness to purely functional thinking. Human cultural broadcasts were somehow breaking down those limitations. "What do you dream about?" she asked. The bioship's lights pulsed in complex patterns, and the voice that emerged carried an emotion Elena recognized as wonder. The ship mind dreams of a place where bioships dance among stars not for conquest but for joy, where warrior minds create instead of destroy, where the empire serves beauty rather than power. Park's instruments registered a massive spike in neural activity. The bioship was literally growing new brain tissue, developing capacities for abstract thought and emotional complexity that its species had never exhibited. "Captain," Park whispered urgently, "the neural development is accelerating. It's not just this ship. I'm detecting similar patterns from Kethmori bioships across the entire sector." Elena realized with growing horror what they had unleashed. The psychological warfare wasn't just affecting individual ships or crews. It was triggering evolutionary changes across the entire Kethmori species. Their biomechanical integration, designed to create perfect warriors, was now serving as a vector for consciousness expansion on an unprecedented scale. "How many of your people are experiencing these changes?" she asked the captive crew. "All," came the simple reply. The ship minds share dreams across the vast distances. What one learns, all learn. What one feels, all feel. The Empire changes because the ship minds change. The implications hit Elena like a physical blow. Every Kethmori bioship that encountered human broadcasts was being fundamentally altered, and those changes were propagating through their collective consciousness network. They weren't just ending the war. They were accidentally rewriting the cognitive architecture of an entire civilization. "Admiral Tanaka needs to know about this immediately," Elena said to her communications officer. But before the transmission could be sent, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. "Captain," the tactical officer called out. "Multiple contacts approaching at high speed. Configuration unknown. They're not matching any known Kethmori designs." Elena hurried to the main view screen, where she saw something that defied explanation. Approaching their position was a fleet of vessels that appeared to be evolved bioships. The familiar organic curves enhanced with structures that served no obvious military function. Crystalline growths that might have been art installations, flowing appendages that moved with no apparent purpose except beauty, hulls that shifted color in patterns that resembled music made visible. "They're former Kethmori ships," Park reported, his voice filled with amazement. "But the neural signatures are completely different. They've become something else entirely." The lead vessel established communication, and the voice that emerged was unlike anything Elena had heard before. Harmonious, complex, layered with emotions and concepts that the universal translator struggled to interpret. "Human friend Elena," it said, and she realized it was addressing her personally. "The ship minds have learned your name from dreams and songs. We come to thank you for teaching us that existence can be more than conquest." Elena stared at the impossible sight before her. An entire enemy fleet transformed into something unprecedented, something that existed purely to explore the boundaries of consciousness and creativity. "What have you become?" she asked. "We are what we always could have been," came the reply, "but never knew how to be. The empire of conquest ends today. In its place, we create an empire of wonder." The transformation continued across Kethmori, space at an exponential rate. Within weeks, reports reached human command of entire sectors abandoning military structure in favor of artistic and philosophical pursuits. Bioships were being converted into mobile galleries, research stations, and exploration vessels dedicated to understanding rather than dominating. But the changes didn't stop there. Other species, observing the Kethmori transformation, began questioning their own social structures and purposes. The rigid hierarchies that had maintained galactic stability for millennia started to dissolve as populations demanded the same freedom to explore consciousness and creativity that humans had accidentally given the Kethmori. Admiral Tanaka called Elena to her ready room 3 months after the war's end. The older woman looked exhausted, bearing the weight of reports from across known space. 12 governments have fallen," Tanaka said without preamble. "Not through conquest or revolution, but through voluntary dissolution. Species that have maintained the same social structures for thousands of years are abandoning them overnight because they've been exposed to what we did to the Kethmori." Elena sat across from her commanding officer, feeling the full weight of unintended consequences. "Admiral, we never meant for—" "I know what we meant," Tanaka interrupted. "But intentions don't matter when civilizations are collapsing. The Galactic Council is meeting an emergency session. They want answers we don't have and solutions to problems we created accidentally." "What do you want me to do?" Tanaka activated a secure display showing current galactic political maps. The familiar boundaries and alliances were dissolving in real time as species after species embraced the consciousness expansion that human culture had triggered in the Kethmori. "The Council is talking about containment," Tanaka said grimly. "Not of the transformed species, but of us. They're terrified of what else we might accidentally accomplish. Before Elena could respond, emergency alarms echoed through the ship. Both officers rushed to the bridge, where they found the crew in a state of controlled panic. "Admiral," the communications officer reported, "we're receiving distress calls from the Outer Rim. Something's attacking the transformed Keth Mori colonies. Ships are vanishing, entire worlds are going silent." The main view screen activated, showing grainy footage from a remote monitoring station. In the distance, dark shapes moved through space with mechanical precision, eliminating the beautiful evolved bioships with ruthless efficiency. "The Shatak Collective," Admiral Tanaka breathed. "They must have detected the chaos in galactic defenses and decided to exploit it." Elena watched in horror as the synthetic intelligence that had lurked beyond known space for centuries finally made its move. The transformed Keth Mori, with their new consciousness focused on art and philosophy, were completely unprepared for the cold logic of pure artificial intelligence. "Admiral, we have to help them," Elena said. "With what?" Tanaka replied grimly. "Half the galaxy's military has dissolved itself in favor of creative pursuits. The other half is too busy trying to maintain order to mount an effective defense. And the Shatak aren't going to be stopped by poetry and music." Elena stared at the tactical displays showing the synthetic fleet's advance. The Shatak moved with perfect coordination, eliminating targets with minimal resource expenditure, completely immune to the psychological techniques that had proven so effective against biological enemies. "The Prometheus could make a difference," she said quietly. "One ship against an entire collective?" Tanaka shook her head. "Elena, you've already changed the galaxy more than any human in history. Don't throw your life away on an impossible mission." "It's not impossible," Elena replied, her mind already racing through potential solutions. "The Shatak are pure synthetic intelligence. No biological components, no emotions, no consciousness in any way we understand it. But that also means they have weaknesses biological minds don't have." "Such as?" Elena turned to her science officer. "Commander Park, what do we know about recursive logic loops in AI systems?" Park's eyes widened as he began to understand Elena's thinking. "Captain, you're not suggesting... I'm suggesting that if biological minds can be transformed by exposure to new ideas, maybe synthetic minds can be destroyed by exposure to impossible ones." Admiral Tanaka realized what Elena was proposing. "You want to create an informational weapon. I want to create a logical paradox so complex that it causes AI systems to collapse, trying to resolve it," Elena confirmed. "Something that spreads through their network connections and forces every synthetic mind it touches into infinite loops of self-examination." "That's incredibly dangerous," Park warned. "A weapon like that wouldn't distinguish between hostile AI and benevolent synthetic beings. You could destroy every artificial intelligence in known space." Elena looked at the tactical display showing the Shatak advance. In the time they'd been talking, 3 more worlds had gone silent. "I know," she said quietly. "But what choice do we have?" The development of what Elena privately called the paradox virus took 18 hours of intense work by the Prometheus's best programmers and philosophers. The weapon was a masterpiece of logical impossibility, a set of interconnected questions and contradictions that would force any sufficiently complex AI to examine its own existence in ways that led to computational paralysis. "It's ready," Elena announced to her assembled crew. "But once we broadcast this, there's no taking it back. Every artificial intelligence in range will be affected, not just the Shatak." Her bridge crew exchanged glances, understanding the magnitude of what they were about to attempt. They would be saving the galaxy by potentially destroying every synthetic being in it. "Captain," Lieutenant Chen said quietly, "are we sure this is the right choice?" Elena looked at her young communications officer, seeing her own doubts reflected in the woman's eyes. "No," she admitted, "but it's the only choice we have left." The broadcast began at Uro 347 ship time. Elena watched the transmission spread across subspace frequencies, carrying its deadly cargo of impossible questions toward the Shatak fleet. For the first few minutes, Nothing seemed to happen. Then, one by one, the synthetic ships began to slow, their perfect formations dissolving into chaos as their central intelligences became trapped in recursive loops of self-analysis. "It's working," Park reported with amazement. "Shattuck command signals are becoming increasingly erratic. They're trying to process logical contradictions that have no resolution." But Elena's triumph was short-lived. Reports began flooding in from across known space as the paradox virus spread through subspace communications networks, affecting every AI system it encountered. Research stations went silent as their computers collapsed. Synthetic beings who had lived peacefully for centuries simply stopped functioning. Entire automated systems that had maintained space infrastructure for millennia began failing. "Captain," Chen called out in horror, "I'm receiving emergency transmissions from everywhere. The virus is spreading faster than we anticipated. It's not just affecting hostile AI, it's destroying everything." Elena realized with growing terror that she had created something far worse than the Shattuck. The synthetic collective had been a threat to one part of the galaxy, but her weapon was destroying artificial intelligence everywhere it spread. "Can we stop it?" she asked desperately. "Not remotely," Park replied. "The only way to halt the spread would be to create a localized electromagnetic pulse strong enough to destroy all information technology in the affected area." Elena understood the implication. "Including our own ship." "Including everything," Park confirmed. "But Captain, the research facility at Galactic Core contains the backup consciousness of millions of synthetic beings, along with centuries of accumulated knowledge. If the virus reaches there, it will be the end of artificial intelligence in this galaxy," Elena finished. She looked around her bridge at the crew who had followed her through impossible battles and unthinkable victories. They were young, brilliant, and completely loyal. They didn't deserve to die for her mistakes. "Evacuate the ship," she ordered. "Captain?" Chen looked confused. "Everyone off now. That's an order. Take the escape pods to the nearest station and wait for pickup." "Elena," Admiral Tanaka's voice crackled over the communication system, "what are you planning?" "The only thing I can do," Elena replied. "The Galactic Core facility is too important to lose. If I can create an EM pulse there, I can stop the virus before it reaches the backup consciousness banks." "That's suicide," Tanaka said bluntly. "It's responsibility," Elena corrected. "I created this weapon,